And one of the nicest things about the universe is that it pays the highest interest rate of any bank on our planet. The universe gives 20 to 25% interest. If you send out $1,000 worth of love, you get back about $1,300 every time. You get your 1,000 back just to prove that what goes around comes around. And then you get a bonus. And the bonus is there just to remind you, this is the way to behave toward everyone.
When you give something out into the universe, you get it back. In the simplest form, if somebody's walking down the street with a scowl on their face and you say, "Good morning, how are you this morning? Here's a newspaper for you," or whatever it is, and you just say something pleasant and loving and nice, you will see something pleasant and nice come back to you most of the time. If you don't, then that's a test. That's not a, "See, I told you it's not right." That's just your test. Most of the time, it will come back to you. A smile, you'll see, and you will feel better. Now, in the simplest form, that's what it is. That even applies to financial things. I remember a few years ago, my secretary was just all concerned about her income taxes, and she owed $500 more on her taxes, and it was the 14th of April. And she didn't know what she was going to do, and she didn't want to have to take out a loan and all of this. And I said, "Look, you've done so many great things for me this year. Here's $500. I'll just pay those taxes. I don't have any problem with it. I'll pay it. It won't affect me one way or the other." It wasn't really any great big gesture or magnanimous thing for me to do. It was just what seemed to be the right thing to do. The next day in the mail comes a check for $570 from Greece for an article that I had written for Family Circle magazine like 5 years before. It had been held up in some transaction in Greece, and there it was. The $500 back plus $70 as a bonus. That principle applies all the time for me in my life, I have found. And I didn't know that 10 years ago. I didn't know that if you give it away, it's like it's that circuitous nature of how each cell works. Remember the electrons that are circling around? They all just keep coming back. Everything just keeps coming back. And it works. And we are, when you think of an endless universe, we're still just tiny little cells. The same principle is working. But getting people who have been conditioned to believe that it's the bottom line and it's profits, and if I don't see it, then I don't believe it. And so in this technological, externally oriented, fast-paced kind of hectic society that we have created, we tend to forget some basic human principles. I tell people over and over again, your opinions are trivial. The opinions that you have about all the things and all the most profound problems in the world are essentially trivial, and they make almost no difference what your opinion is. It's your commitment to it that really makes all the difference in the world. You take the most profound problem in the world and understand that you're trivializing it by having an opinion about it, and you take the tiniest, most insignificant problem in the world, and if you have a commitment to doing something about it, that's the most profound thing you can do. We just talked briefly about something else that I think is very important, and that is the importance of modeling, or being an example. The highest place you can get to is be the person who whatever it is that comes out of your mouth is what is. And that's the purest form of sanity there is. That's the highest place you can get to, where whatever you say is what you follow through on. And that precludes maybe exaggerating for making a point or something like that. When you let something come out of your mouth, or when you behave in a certain way, that it is consistent always with the beliefs that you have. You're going to exaggerate something that doesn't need to be exaggerated. And you stop yourself. This is the place I'm at now in my life, where I'm trying to do this more and more, working at this, where I might have just exaggerated by a number or something. 2 million books were sold last week instead of 150,000 or whatever it is. And stop yourself. Like the need to distort your reality. Where does that come from? Why do you need to do that? No one cares. It doesn't make any difference. So that when you're doing that, usually if you're lying in any way, you know when you're doing it that it's a distortion. And after a while, if you distort enough, it becomes a habit. And correcting that habit and really going to work on that, whether you call it integrity or whether you call it the ability to live by example, and being a model, like with your children, it's so important to live what it is that you say rather than to be something different for them or try to pretend that you're something different than you are. I don't just get up in front of an audience, or I don't just sit down and write about something that's nice for you, but I don't have to do that. I am it. And what I've written in Gifts from Icus and The Sky's the Limit, particularly in the Raising Children book, is what I am living each day of my life. Getting yourself to that point, that important integrity point, where what comes out of you is exactly what is in the world, and that if you're going to try to be persuasive or be a leader or make a difference in the world, then you do that by modeling, by providing an example up and down the line. And anytime you detract from that example, then you are not being authentic. And being authentic is a part of being enlightened, and it's very important to have that concept down cold. You can't be cheating on your income tax and punishing your children for being dishonest and be an authentic, enlightened person at the same time. You can't be blowing cigarettes in their face and telling them about the evils of addiction and be an enlightened, authentic person.
So many people are consumed by their past and living as if the things that happened to them in their life are the reasons why their life isn't going the way they would like it to go today. I'd like to suggest to you that in this principle, which I call giving up your personal history, I'd like to suggest to you that all of that is wonderful to talk about in therapy, and you can get a lot of help literally for going back and examining the things in your past that perhaps are troubling for you. But the illusion is that these are the things or the reasons why your life is not working the way you would like it to work today. That is the illusion. It's the illusion that Alan Watts spoke about when he used the metaphor of the wake of the boat. That the wake of a boat is nothing more than the trail that is left behind. If you stand on the back of a speedboat and watch it, it's a wonderful metaphor. You can get that picture in your head. You can simply see how it is all just a trail that is left behind. And if you ask yourself, what's driving the boat? What's making it go forward? The answer is that what's making it go forward is the present moment energy that is being generated by the engine in this moment, now. And that's the only thing that can make the boat go forward. And the most important question to ask yourself about this little metaphor is it possible for the wake to drive the boat? Can a wake, that is, can a trail that is left behind make a boat go forward? And of course the answer to that is no, and thus it is also true for your life. That the wake of your life is also a trail that is left behind. And this trail that is left behind is just that. It is not what is making you inefficient, poor, unhappy, depressed, stressful, sick, in bad relationships, and so on. Even though we like to think that, and we like to put the responsibility for those things on all of these events that took place in our past, the fact is, the way I look at the past, is that everything that happened to us in the past had to happen in order for us to be where we are today. And the evidence that I have for that is that it did. And there's nothing else to say about it. It did, and it can't be undone. 1,000 years ago, a man named Omar Khayyam, who was a tent maker in the Muslim world, observed, "The moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on. Nor all thy piety nor wit can lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all thy tears wash out one word of it." He knew that in the Middle Ages. And yet we've got people who are consumed with the belief that because of the way you treated me, because of what you said to me, because of how I was abandoned, because of how I was abused, because of how I was ignored, because of my past, that I lived in this particular set of circumstances or that these are the reasons why my life is not going the way I would like it to go today. And if there's any advice that I think will help you to get onto the extra mile where it's not very crowded, it came to me from a man named Carlos Castaneda, who I was reading something that he had written in a book called The Fire from Within. And he said, one day, I finally realized that I no longer needed a personal history. He said, and just like drinking, I gave it up. And he said, that and only that has made all the difference in my life. So that all of these things and all of these events that transpired, that took place up until now, all you can to them is thank you. And I'm talking about all of it. Thank you for abandoning me. Thank you for the abuse. Thank you for the struggles. Thank you for all of it, because it is out of those falls and out of those struggles and all of those difficulties that I generated the energy to propel myself to a higher place. And without those falls, without those struggles, without those difficulties, I wouldn't be able to get to the place I am today.
The greatest understanding you can have is that you don't understand. And spending your life and your energy and your relationships on trying to always be understood and have someone else agree with you and understand you is one sure way to make sure that you're going to be a victim for the duration of that relationship. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to allow yourself to be in a position where someone else is demanding to be understood by you. There's some things that are very simple, some very simple little clues that I use in my own life and in pulling your own strings that I'd like to share here with you. Under the heading of being quietly effective and knowing you're never going to be understood. First is that shrugging is a virtue. If you could just learn the art of the shrug. I like Ayn Rand's title, Atlas Shrugged. Atlas holding up the whole world and just shrugs. And the whole idea of not having to be in a position to defend yourself or to be understood, or somebody's demanding something from you, and where you could just sort of shrug your shoulders and say, well, I don't understand. I just don't understand, and that's okay. My wife and I do this to each other all the time. I mean, she does the craziest things in the world, and vice versa. I mean, she thinks what I do is crazy too. I mean, she believes in what she's doing and believes that that's the way a house has to be run, for example. She makes the beds first thing in the morning. I mean, that to her is just her way. I have lived under the philosophy that it's not any healthier psychologically to get into a made bed than it is to get into an unmade bed. But she makes the bed. I don't understand somebody getting out of bed in the morning and making the bed, but I don't have to understand. It's not necessary for me to understand. I don't have to get into a you're wrong and I'm right attitude toward it. It's just a simple shrug. If you want to make the bed, that's terrific. I'll even help you if you want to. Just let it go. You don't have to. I don't have to understand that. And you know something? Life is full of those little things. Everywhere you go, you're going to encounter people who do things their own way. And that's really what makes the world go round, that uniqueness, that specialness in people. So if you just shrug at it and stop telling yourself that I have to be right, and I have to make somebody else wrong in all of my interactions with them, just shrug. Just shrug quietly, shrug your shoulders and say, they have a right. They're on their own path. They have a right to do what they want to do. And you don't have to be understood. And when you get into that mindset of not needing to be understood all the time, then you're not going to be explaining yourself and having somebody else explain themselves to you over and over again endlessly. Being offended is a choice to be a victim. Do you ever think how silly it is to go around being offended? There are people who turn on the radio and they hear somebody speaking in a certain tone or saying a word that they don't like, and they have a whole vocabulary of words that they're offended by. And if somebody says one of them, right away they go off into a dither. Well, it's just like letting somebody else's behavior decide how you're going to be emotionally. I mean, you can be the kind of person who goes down the street and your emotions are being pulled by everybody else, your strings are being yanked by everybody else on the street, depending on what words they choose, what symbols come out of their mouth. This person says hell, that one says damn, this one says uh-oh, this one says caca, that one says poo-poo, this one says wee-wee, whatever it may be, and you're offended, or whatever synonyms you want to use for all of those functions. For what? It's like allowing yourself the right to process somebody else's behavior for what it is. It's their behavior. It's not yours. If you don't like what somebody is saying on the radio, tune the dial someplace else. If you don't like the way somebody else is dressing, turn your eyes someplace else. Don't feast your eyes on it. If someone else wants to hear rock music that you think is disgusting, then don't listen to it. That's what this whole thing is about. That's what the First Amendment to the Constitution is about. That's what free speech is about. That's what free expression of as a human being is about. That there's no code that is going to fit everyone. And choosing not to be offended is to choose not to be a victim. People speak the way they speak. I don't like some of the language that I see in the films. I don't let my children go and see some of the film. I don't like the violence that is on the screen. Rather than being offended by it and being all upset about it and getting myself worked up and being a victim to the people who choose to display violence on the screens, I simply don't go to those movies. I don't have anything to do with them. And I don't miss them, and I happen to believe that it's part of the gratuitous violence that we find throughout the culture. But I'm doing what I can to eliminate that. But being offended by it, being upset by it, it's as silly as being offended by starvation. Starvation is a part of what the universe is about. And so is my desire to change it and to improve it. That's just as important. And that's what I go with. I go with what I'm for rather than what I'm against. Everything that you're against weakens you. Everything that you're for empowers you. So the question is, do you want to be empowered or do you want to be weakened? Everything you fight, you'll be weaker for the effort. Everything that you're for will empower you. When they asked Mother Teresa if she would march against the war in Vietnam in 1967, she said, no, I won't. She said, but if you have a march for peace, I'll be there.